I never imagined that at 62 years old, I'd stand on my own son's porch holding a bag of groceries, while he and his wife laughed like I'd brought them bad luck. It was raining that day, the kind of slow, tired rain that sounds like regret tapping on your roof. Tara opened the door first, her voice sweet enough to rot. "Oh, Evelyn, again with the coupons?" she said, eyeing the paper bags. Behind her, Michael chuckled. "Mom, we're fine. You don't need to play delivery girl." He said it like I was a stranger, not the woman who sold her car to help him through college. I smiled anyway, the kind of smile that hides humiliation like perfume hides smoke. "I just thought you might need a few things," I whispered. Tara leaned in and said quietly, "What we need, Evelyn, is for you to stop showing up uninvited." Her words didn't sting. They settled, like dust on a table you stop bothering to clean. I set the groceries down, nodded once, and turned to leave. That's when I heard Michael laugh again, soft but sharp. "She never learns," he said, "always trying to buy love." That was the moment I knew something had shifted, not in them, but in me. Because love, when laughed at, starts turning into something colder, quieter, stronger. And that night, when someone knocked on my door, desperate, soaked, trembling, I finally understood what karma sounds like. It doesn't shout. It knocks softly, just once, and waits to be let in. Stay till the end, because the same hands that fed them once would soon close every door they ever took for granted. Before all that humiliation, my days were simple, quiet enough to hear the kettle whistle and the clock tick against the wall. I lived alone in a little house at the edge of Willow Creek, one of those neighborhoods where the mailboxes lean from years of storms and the wind smells faintly of old rain and lilac bushes. Every morning, I'd open the blinds, pour my coffee, and whisper a small prayer. Not for myself, but for Michael. He was my only child, the only proof that something good had come out of a hard marriage and harder years. I'd raised him alone after his father walked out, worked 3 jobs, a diner waitress by day, a cleaning lady by night, and every weekend at the post office sorting letters that never belonged to me. My hands were never soft again after those years, but they were steady, strong, faithful. When Michael graduated, I thought life was finally giving me peace. He looked so handsome in that blue cap and gown, shaking hands, promising he'd make me proud. I remember him hugging me after the ceremony. He said, "One day, Mom, you'll rest. I'll take care of everything." And I believed him, because mothers always do. He married Tara 2 years later. A city girl with bright nails, bigger dreams, and eyes that looked at me like I was an inconvenience. At first I tried. I brought her homemade pie, knit her scarves, even helped them pay for their first apartment. She smiled sweetly, said thank you, and then started calling me Evelyn instead of Mom. It's funny how names can change the air between people. The moment she stopped calling me Mom, I stopped feeling like one. When Michael got a job at a real estate firm, they started dressing fancier, talking faster, spending louder. Tara loved throwing little parties, wine glasses, charcuterie boards, the kind of gatherings where people smile too much and mean too little. I'd visit sometimes, quietly leaving groceries or a casserole. They'd thank me, but always with that same look, like I was an echo from a life they wanted to forget. Then one afternoon, Tara asked casually, "So, Evelyn, you get a pension now, right?" I nodded. "Yes, a small one from the postal office." She smiled, her lipstick perfect. "Must be nice having something steady." That night, Michael called. "Mom," he said, "we're a little behind this month. Just until payday, could you help?" I didn't hesitate. Because when you've spent your life giving, the word no never comes naturally. It started small, a few hundred here, a few thousand there. Each time, a promise followed. "We'll pay you back, Mom. We just need to get through this month." But months turned into years, and every thank you got shorter. Sometimes I'd see photos on social media, Tara in designer heels, Michael beside a new car, their captions full of gratitude for hard work paying off. No mention of the old woman writing checks in her kitchen, balancing bills so quietly that even the walls learned not to creak. I told myself it was fine, that helping your child succeed is a mother's reward, that one day they'd remember who held the ladder when they climbed. Then came the night of the groceries. I'd heard from a neighbor that Michael and Tara were hosting a dinner, a big one with his new colleagues. I thought I'd surprise them, bring a few things, fresh bread, fruit, maybe pie. Old habits die slow. But when I stepped onto that porch, when Tara opened that door and saw me standing there, something inside me cracked. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was revelation. Because in her smirk, I finally saw the truth. They didn't love me anymore. They just loved my money. That realization is a quiet kind of death. The moment a mother becomes a wallet, a helper, a name written on checks but forgotten in prayers. After that day, I stopped calling first, stopped offering, stopped visiting unless invited, but I still sent the checks, because habit can look a lot like love when you're lonely enough. Then, last winter, my heater broke. I called Michael, just to ask if he knew a repairman. He said he'd call me back. He never did. Instead, Tara texted 2 words, "We're busy." So I fixed it myself, hands trembling, heart heavy. And that's when I decided, no more. No more excuses, no more blind faith, no more pretending that being needed was the same as being loved. I called the bank the next morning and changed everything. My pension, my savings, every automatic payment, gone from their reach. That night, as I sat by the window, a storm rolled in, and for the first time in years, I felt something like peace. Because even silence feels warm when it's finally yours. I didn't know it then, but that small act, that single decision to close my hands, was the first domino in a chain that would destroy everything they'd built on lies. For months after that night on the porch, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Michael was my son. Tara was family. Maybe I just caught them at a bad time. So, when they called one Sunday afternoon and asked to visit, I said yes. They came with flowers, bright yellow ones, the kind that look like sunlight until they start to wilt. Tara hugged me, too tightly. "We've missed you," she said, her voice sugar slick. Michael nodded. "Yeah, Mom, we should spend more time together." It sounded rehearsed, but I didn't want to believe that. We had dinner, the same table where I'd fed him since he was a boy. Halfway through the meal, Tara leaned forward. "Evelyn," she began softly, "you remember that money your husband left? The one in that trust account?" I froze for a moment. That account was sacred, not because of its size, but because it was all that was left of a man who'd once loved me enough to think about my future. I nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember." "Why?" Tara glanced at Michael. He reached across the table and held my hand. "Mom, there's this incredible business opportunity," he said. "A small real estate partnership. We'd make enough profit to double your savings in a few months. It's safe, completely legal, and I'd handle everything personally." Tara chimed in. "You wouldn't have to lift a finger. We just need the funds temporarily." I looked at them both, my son's confident grin, her eager eyes. Something in my chest tightened. I wanted to say no, but motherhood makes you forget how to protect yourself when it's your child asking. So I said yes. We went to the bank the next day. I signed papers I didn't understand, trusting his explanations. "Don't worry, Mom," Michael said, patting my shoulder. "You'll thank me soon." I remember leaving the bank and seeing my reflection in the glass door. My smile looked borrowed. My trust looked fragile. Weeks passed. They stopped calling as often. Whenever I asked how the investment was doing, Tara would say, "It's early, Evelyn. Real estate takes time." Michael would add, "Mom, you've got to be patient. You'll see." But I noticed little things, small lies pretending to be oversight. Once I called him at his office. His assistant said he hadn't worked there for 2 weeks. Another time, I saw a bank statement in my mailbox, one that wasn't supposed to come to me anymore. The balance looked wrong, lower, much lower. When I asked about it, Michael sighed heavily. "Mom, you don't understand how investments work. The money moves around. It's fine." But his tone wasn't fine. It was impatient, defensive. And for the first time, I felt fear instead of guilt. That night, I took out the old folder where I kept every paper my husband left behind: his insurance, his pension, his small savings account. His handwriting stared back at me. For Evelyn, for her peace. Peace. What a fragile thing to lose. The next week, they stopped answering my calls altogether. No replies, no visits, just silence. Until one late evening, my neighbor called. "Evelyn," she whispered, "I saw Michael and Tara arguing outside their house. Loud. Looked serious." 2 days later, they showed up at my door, uninvited, panicked, pale. Tara's mascara was smeared. Michael's voice shook. "Mom, something happened," he started. Tara interrupted. "It wasn't our fault. The deal fell through. The company, it was a scam." The word scam hit the room like thunder. They'd invested everything: my husband's savings, my pension, even borrowed money from their credit cards, into something that didn't exist. All gone. I sat there quietly while they tried to explain, their words tumbling like dice they hoped would land on sympathy. Tara cried. Michael shouted. But all I heard was the echo of my own voice from years ago, telling that little boy to always be honest. And now, here he was, lying to himself, drowning in his own choices. When they finished, I simply asked, "Did you ever really think of me when you took that money?" Silence. Tara looked away. Michael swallowed hard. "We thought we could make it better, Mom. For all of us." I nodded slowly. "For all of us. Or for both of you." That night, after they left, I sat in the dark for a long time. The house felt colder than usual, but beneath the ache, beneath the tears that refused to fall, something new started to form. Not anger, not revenge, just awakening. Because love without respect is charity. And I was done giving charity to people who only remembered my worth when their world started burning. I used to believe anger came in shouts. But now I know. The loudest kind comes in silence, right before the soul hardens. After they lost the money, I thought guilt might soften them. I thought maybe my son would sit beside me, apologize, tell me he'd made a mistake. But no. Instead, he came over one night, uninvited, half-drunk, and full of pride that hadn't learned its lesson. He slammed the door behind him. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he barked. I blinked. "What I've done?" "Yes," he shouted. "You stopped helping us when we needed you the most. You always make it about yourself. You never support me. Never trust me." I stared at him. My own son, veins bulging in his neck, spit on his lip, accusing me like I was the thief. "Michael," I said quietly, "you stole from me." He laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "Please, Mom, don't play the victim. You've had it easy. Dad left you money, a pension, a house. What have I ever had?" The room fell silent. That's when I realized he didn't see me as a mother anymore. He saw me as a wallet that had finally run dry. Tara joined in a few days later. She came to my house wearing her bitterness like perfume. "Look, Evelyn," she started, voice sharp and fake sweet. "Michael's been under a lot of pressure. You could have helped him more. Maybe if you weren't so—" She paused, then smiled thinly. "Selfish. Selfish." That word hit differently coming from someone who'd emptied my savings while buying designer handbags. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I stood up, slow and steady, like something ancient rising from sleep. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Get out of my house." Her smirk vanished. "What?" "You heard me." Her face flushed red. "You can't talk to me like that." I stepped closer. "You've been talking to me like garbage for years, Tara. You laugh at my clothes, my food, my house. The same house that fed your husband, the same food that raised him into the man you broke." She didn't have an answer. She just turned and left, muttering something about crazy old women. When the door shut, I felt something inside me unclench. That was the day I buried the last piece of the woman who used to beg to be respected. From then on, I stopped pretending. I stopped calling, stopped asking if they were eating, sleeping, surviving. I started keeping my money locked, my heart guarded, and my face unreadable. When Michael tried calling for advice, I let it ring. When Tara texted asking for small help, I deleted it. Weeks turned into months, and slowly I began to breathe again. I started gardening, reading, cooking for myself, not for anyone's approval. The house that once felt empty began to feel sacred. Like peace was finally choosing me again. But peace never stays long when guilt lives next door. One afternoon, I was watering my plants when Michael showed up again, this time with his voice already raised before he reached the porch. "You think this is funny, don't you?" he shouted. "Think what is funny?" "You cutting us off, you ruined us." "Mom, we could have recovered if you hadn't gotten greedy." Greedy. The same boy who once cried because I couldn't afford his school shoes now called me greedy. I didn't move, didn't shout. I just stared at him until his words started to stumble. "You want to see what you've done to us?" he said, fumbling his phone. He showed me photos, eviction notices, bank statements, Tara crying in their half-packed living room. "Look," he said, "you destroyed our lives." I handed the phone back, my hand steady. "No, Michael, you destroyed your own." He froze. For a second, the man disappeared, and I saw the little boy again, lost, ashamed, small. But pity can't live where disrespect has already built a home. So I turned around and walked back inside. He shouted after me, called me names I won't repeat, cursed the woman who gave him everything. But I didn't look back, because I had finally learned something. Blood means nothing if it demands your dignity as payment. That night, I locked every door, every account, every ounce of trust I had left, and as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above me, I whispered, "You'll learn, Michael. Maybe not today, maybe not kindly, but karma has a schedule." I used to believe anger came in shouts, but now I know the loudest kind comes in silence right before the soul hardens. After they lost the money, I thought guilt might soften them. I thought maybe my son would sit beside me, apologize, tell me he'd made a mistake. But no. Instead, he came over one night, uninvited, half drunk, and full of pride that hadn't learned its lesson. He slammed the door behind him. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he barked. I blinked. "What I've done?" "Yes," he shouted. "You stopped helping us when we needed you the most. You always make it about yourself. You never support me, never trust me." I stared at him, my own son, veins bulging in his neck, spit on his lip, accusing me like I was the thief. "Michael," I said quietly, "you stole from me." He laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "Please, Mom, don't play the victim. You've had it easy. Dad left you money, a pension, a house. What have I ever had?" The room fell silent. That's when I realized he didn't see me as a mother anymore. He saw me as a wallet that had finally run dry. Tara joined in a few days later. She came to my house, wearing her bitterness like perfume. "Look, Evelyn," she started, voice sharp and fake sweet. "Michael's been under a lot of pressure. You could have helped him more. Maybe if you weren't so—" She paused, then smiled thinly. "Selfish. Selfish." That word hit differently coming from someone who'd emptied my savings while buying designer handbags. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I stood up, slow and steady, like something ancient rising from sleep. I looked her dead in the eye and said, Get out of my house." Her smirk vanished. "What?" "You heard me." Her face flushed red. "You can't talk to me like that." I stepped closer. "You've been talking to me like garbage for years, Tara. You laugh at my clothes, my food, my house, the same house that fed your husband, the same food that raised him into the man you broke." She didn't have an answer. She just turned and left, muttering something about crazy old women. When the door shut, I felt something inside me unclench. That was the day I buried the last piece of the woman who used to beg to be respected. From then on, I stopped pretending. I stopped calling, stopped asking if they were eating, sleeping, surviving. I started keeping my money locked, my heart guarded, and my face unreadable. When Michael tried calling for advice, I let it ring. When Tara texted asking for small help, I deleted it. Weeks turned into months, and slowly I began to breathe again. I started gardening, reading, cooking for myself, not for anyone's approval. The house that once felt empty began to feel sacred, like peace was finally choosing me again. But peace never stays long when guilt lives next door. One afternoon, I was watering my plants when Michael showed up again, this time with his voice already raised before he reached the porch. "You think this is funny, don't you?" he shouted. "Think what is funny?" "You cutting us off. You ruined us, Mom. We could have recovered if you hadn't gotten greedy." Greedy. The same boy who once cried because I couldn't afford his school shoes now called me greedy. I didn't move, didn't shout. I just stared at him until his words started to stumble. "You want to see what you've done to us?" he said, fumbling his phone. He showed me photos, eviction notices, bank statements, Tara crying in their half-packed living room. "Look," he said, "you destroyed our lives." I handed the phone back, my hands steady. "No, Michael, you destroyed your own." He froze. For a second, the man disappeared. And I saw the little boy again, lost, ashamed, small. But pity can't live where disrespect has already built a home. So I turned around and walked back inside. He shouted after me, called me names I won't repeat, cursed the woman who gave him everything. But I didn't look back, because I had finally learned something. Blood means nothing if it demands your dignity as payment. That night, I locked every door, every account, every ounce of trust I had left. And as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above me, I whispered, "You'll learn, Michael. Maybe not today, maybe not kindly. But karma has a schedule." Karma doesn't make noise when it arrives. It doesn't knock politely or announce itself with thunder. It just starts showing up in the small things, like a call that goes unanswered, a bill that doesn't get paid, a silence that stretches too long to ignore. A few weeks after Michael's last outburst, I started hearing whispers. Small-town gossip travels faster than repentance. At the grocery store, at church, even at the post office where I used to work, people said Michael and Tara had gotten into trouble, lost their apartment, owed money. The perfect couple was starting to crack. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. But inside me, there was a strange calm. The kind that comes when truth finally begins to catch up with pride. Then one morning, I got a letter in the mail. Not handwritten, official, stamped. It was from the bank, a notice about a loan I'd never taken, a loan under my name. My blood turned cold. I went straight to the branch, my hands trembling as I held that paper out to the teller. She looked at it, typed something on her computer, and then frowned. "Mrs. Collins," she said softly, "this loan was approved months ago, using your pension account as collateral." My breath caught. "Who authorized it?" I asked. She hesitated. "Your son, ma'am, Michael Collins. You're listed as co-signer." It felt like the room tilted sideways. The ground under my feet turned into air. I could barely hear her voice anymore, just the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I left the bank without a word, walked home in silence. By the time I reached my porch, my knees were shaking, but my mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in years. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I sat at the table, spread out every paper, every document, every bank slip, and wrote one thing in my notebook: they will never touch my name again. The next morning, I went back to the bank, closed every shared account, moved my remaining savings to a new institution under legal protection, filed a fraud report. Quietly, efficiently, without warning them. By the time I came home, it was raining. The kind of heavy, relentless rain that makes the sky sound angry. Hours later, just after midnight, there was a knock on my door. A desperate, frantic, almost animal knock. I didn't move at first, but it came again, harder, louder. When I opened the door, they were standing there. Michael and Tara, drenched, shaking, mascara running, breathless. "Mom, please," Michael gasped. "We need help." Tara's face was pale. "We're being evicted. The bank froze everything. We don't have anywhere else to go." I stared at them. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. "The bank froze everything?" I said slowly. Michael nodded. "Yes, it's like they're punishing us." "No," I said quietly. "They're protecting me." His eyes widened. What did you do?" "I did what any sane person would do when their own blood steals from them," I said coldly. "I made sure you'd never do it again." Tara stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You can't just abandon us like this, Evelyn. We're family." Family. That word again, used like a shield after every betrayal. I looked at her, my voice low but steady. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't steal pensions from the woman who raised them. Michael's face twisted. "You're heartless." I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and said, "No, son. You're just finally meeting a mother who stopped being your victim." They stood there in the rain, speechless. I could see the disbelief in their eyes. How dare the woman they mocked, used, and humiliated finally say no? Michael's voice broke, a mix of anger and panic. "Mom, please, just this once. We'll fix everything." I shook my head. "I fixed it already. You just don't like the way it feels." The thunder cracked above us. Tara started crying. Real tears this time, not the rehearsed kind. But I didn't move. I let them stand there, wet, desperate, and unmasked. For years, they made me feel like a burden in their home. Now life had brought them to mine, empty-handed, humbled, and hungry. Karma doesn't knock softly. It drags you to the same doorstep you once looked down on. After a long silence, I said quietly, "You should leave before I call the police." Tara looked stunned. "You wouldn't—" "Try me," I said. Michael stared at me. Not as a mother, not as a woman, but as something he couldn't control anymore. And that terrified him. He whispered something under his breath, something bitter, then turned away. Tara followed, stumbling in the rain. Their car drove off into the night, taillights flickering like dying hope. When I closed the door, I didn't cry. I just stood there, hands still on the knob, breathing in the smell of rain and freedom. For the first time in decades, the house didn't feel small. It felt powerful, alive. And as I turned off the lights and walked toward my bedroom, I realized sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms or apologies. Sometimes it comes drenched in rain, knocking at your door, wearing your son's face. When morning came, the rain was gone. But the silence it left behind felt heavier than thunder. I made my coffee, same as always, but it tasted different. Freedom has a flavor, bitter and clean. I thought that night's chaos would be the end of it, but I was wrong. The real storm hadn't even started. 3 days later, a man from the bank showed up. Not the polite kind, the serious kind. Dark suit, clipboard, careful eyes. "Mrs. Collins," he said, We need to clarify a few irregularities about your accounts." He laid out a folder on my kitchen table. Inside were copies of documents, my pension withdrawal forms, my late husband's life insurance policy, and something I had never seen before, a deed transfer for my property. My stomach turned cold. "I never signed these," I said. He looked at me with pity. "That's what we suspected." He turned the papers toward me. There it was. My signature, perfect, practiced, but not mine. Someone had been forging my name, and not just anyone. The same handwriting that used to write Happy Mother's Day on cheap cards. Michael. I felt my breath catch in my chest. The man cleared his throat. "We're coordinating with law enforcement. You might be contacted for a statement." After he left, I sat in that chair for a long time, staring at the fake signature. The betrayal didn't feel human anymore. It felt surgical, precise, heartless, and deliberate. I opened the old wooden box where I kept all of my husband's letters. There was one I hadn't read in years, the one he wrote before he died. The paper had yellowed, but the words still felt warm. "Evelyn, promise me you'll guard what we built, not for me, not for money, but for the dignity that comes with it. Because some people love until they need something, and others love only until you stop giving." I read it 3 times that night, each word cut deeper, because now I understood exactly who he'd been warning me about, even back then. The next morning, I called the bank's fraud department, then the insurance company, then the county office where deeds were filed. Everywhere I called, the same story repeated. Forged forms, digital signatures, false authorizations, all under my name, all linked to one person, Michael Collins. The realization was heavy, but not surprising. I had raised a boy who learned how to survive, but not how to have a soul. Tara, too, was part of it. Her name was on several witness forms. Fake witnesses, fake approvals. She had helped him drain what was left of my husband's account into their own business account, the one they used for that investment scam, and now everything was gone. The scam company vanished. The accounts were frozen. The investigators were circling. I could have stayed silent, but silence had already cost me enough. So when the police called, I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said, "I'll give my statement, every detail." The officer on the phone paused. "Ma'am, are you sure? It's your son." "Yes," I said, voice steady. "And he stopped being my son the day he used my dead husband's name to steal." That night, I slept with the letter from my husband beside my bed. It didn't feel like grief anymore, it felt like purpose. The next morning, I drove downtown to the station. They took my fingerprints, compared them to the ones on the forged documents. The match was clear. The signatures were fake. Legally, it was fraud. Criminal. As I signed the official complaint, I thought about every humiliation, every time they'd rolled their eyes when I spoke, every insult disguised as concern, every sneer when I brought gifts they didn't want. All of it led here, to this signature, my real one, on the paper that would finally hold them accountable. When I walked out of the station, the sky was gray again, heavy, waiting. But this time, I wasn't afraid of storms. I was the storm. That evening, the phone rang. It was a detective. "We've located the couple," he said. "They're being investigated for multiple counts of fraud. You'll be notified if there's a court date." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just said, "Thank you." Because justice doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it just arrives quietly, like a mother signing her name for the last time on behalf of a love that no longer exists. The morning of the hearing smelled like rain and burnt coffee. I remember looking in the mirror, buttoning my plain gray blouse and thinking, this isn't justice. This is anatomy. The anatomy of betrayal, laid bare in front of strangers. The courthouse in Willow Creek wasn't grand, just a small brick building with peeling paint and tired flags. But that day, it felt like a stage built for truth. When I walked in, Heads turned. Not because I looked important, but because everyone knew what had happened. Small towns don't forget, and in a place like ours, a son stealing from his mother travels faster than the morning paper. Michael and Tara were already there, sitting at the defense table. He looked thinner, pale. The expensive suit couldn't hide the exhaustion. Tara's makeup couldn't hide the fear. For a second, I almost pitied them. Almost. The clerk called my name. "Mrs. Evelyn Collins, please take the stand." I stood, walked slowly. Not out of weakness, but control. Every step sounded like a heartbeat against the tile floor. When the lawyer asked me to explain, I didn't tremble. I spoke the way I used to read bedtime stories. Calm, steady, measured. I told them everything. The forged papers, the stolen pension, the fake signatures, the loan that never existed, how they'd taken my husband's memory and turned it into currency. As I spoke, I could feel Tara staring at the floor and Michael shifting restlessly in his chair. When I finished, the lawyer said, "Mrs. Collins, would you like to say anything to the defendants?" The room went still. I turned toward them and said, "No, I already said everything by surviving." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. But I didn't look away. Michael's lawyer tried to paint a story, said it was a family misunderstanding, that emotions ran high, that I'd authorized the transactions. But the judge wasn't buying it. The bank records were clear. The handwriting analysis was conclusive. And then came the twist I didn't expect. The investigator produced emails, ones Tara had sent to the fraudulent investment company. Only it wasn't fake, it was hers. She had set up the shell account herself to funnel the money through under the company name TJM Enterprises, her initials, Tara Jane Michaels. The courtroom went silent. Michael turned to her, confusion flooding his face. "What the hell is this?" he whispered harshly. She didn't answer. He stood, voice cracking. "You did this!" Tara broke. "You told me to handle it. You said your mom would never find out." The judge slammed his gavel. "Sit down!" But it was too late. The truth was crawling out of every word, every lie, every desperate breath. They had betrayed each other now. The same greed that made them mock me was now devouring them whole. When the court recessed, Michael tried to approach me. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice trembling, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I turned my head just slightly. "Yes, you did," I said. "You meant every bit of it, until you lost control." He looked at me like a drowning man watching the shore disappear. "Please," he whispered, "say something. Anything." I met his eyes, tired, red, broken, and said, "I already did, Michael. I said no. You just never heard it." The trial lasted 3 days. By the end, both of them were found guilty of fraud, identity theft, and financial misappropriation. Probation for Tara, restitution for Michael, their names published in every local paper. The same neighbors who once praised their lifestyle now whispered behind their backs. At the grocery store, people avoided them. At church, they sat alone. And I went back to my small house with my peace intact. But the story didn't end in that courtroom. It ended a week later when I got a call from Tara. Her voice was hollow. "Evelyn, I just wanted to say sorry." I didn't reply. She continued, "You won. Congratulations. But just know, Michael blames you for everything. And he's not the same." I took a slow breath. "No, Tara," I said quietly. "He's finally exactly who he's always been. The mask just came off." And before she could speak again, I hung up. That night, I lit a candle in front of my husband's photo, something I hadn't done in years. The flame flickered, small but alive. I whispered, "It's done, Randall. They took everything but my peace, and I finally took that back." The next morning, the mailman brought a letter. It was from the restitution office. They'd recovered a portion of the stolen funds. Not all of it, but enough. I placed the letter on the table beside the candle and smiled faintly. Not because of the money, but because it meant something bigger. It meant my name was clean again, my dignity untouched. My silence had spoken louder than their lies ever could. And when I stepped outside, I saw the first light of morning breaking through the clouds. For the first time in a long time, the air felt honest. It had been 6 months since the trial. Winter had turned the street outside my house into a quiet gray postcard, cold, still, and honest. I thought I'd never see him again. But one evening, just as the sun dipped below the rooftops, I heard that knock. Not the frantic pounding from before. This one was slow, heavy, the kind of knock that carries shame inside it. When I opened the door, he was standing there, Michael. No suit this time, no swagger, just an old coat, stubble, and a pair of eyes that looked like they'd been crying for too long. "Mom," he said quietly. I didn't answer. He looked thinner, shoulders hunched, hands trembling. Even his voice sounded smaller. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, wordlessly. He walked in like a stranger, glancing around the room as if it were a museum of things he'd once owned. The house was warm. The smell of stew filled the air. He looked at the table, at the food, at the calmness in the room, and whispered, "You're still cooking." "Yes," I said. "I eat. I live." He laughed bitterly. "Good for you." There was venom in his voice, not strength, just leftover pride trying to breathe. He sat down without asking. "I lost everything," he said. "Tara left. I'm broke. No job, no friends, nothing." His voice cracked. "You happy now?" I looked at him, the boy I'd raised with trembling hands and borrowed money, and said quietly, "Happiness doesn't grow from other people's pain, but peace does grow from truth." He slammed his fist on the table. "Stop talking like that, like you're better than me." I didn't flinch. "Better?" I said. "No, Michael, just clean. You chose dirt." He stood up, pacing like a caged animal. "You think you're some kind of saint. You turned your own son in." I met his gaze. Calm, unblinking. "No, Michael. I turned a thief in. My son disappeared long before the police came." He froze. For the first time, I saw the truth hit him. Not his anger, but his emptiness. "You could have just helped me," he whispered. "I did," I said softly. "I raised you, I fed you, I forgave you, until forgiveness started killing me." He looked around again, his eyes darting toward the framed photos on the wall, our old family pictures, the one where he was 10, holding his father's hand. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said, barely audible, "I hate him, you know." "Dad, for dying, for leaving you with nothing, for making me carry it." I shook my head. "No, Michael, you didn't carry it. You sold it." His breath hitched, sharp, broken. He sat back down, covering his face. I didn't know what else to do. I thought money would fix everything. "Money doesn't fix what's rotten inside," I said quietly. "It just decorates it." The clock ticked between us, steady and cruel. He lifted his head, eyes red. "So, that's it? You just shut me out forever?" I walked to the window, watching the dusk fade into darkness. "You already shut yourself out, Michael. You just didn't notice when the door closed." He stood, voice trembling. "I'm still your son." I turned slowly. "No," I said. "You're the man my son became when he stopped loving anyone who couldn't give him something." He looked like he wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Just silence, the kind that suffocates. Then quietly he asked, "Do you ever forgive me?" I thought about it. Truly did. Then said, "Forgiveness is for those who want to rebuild. You still just want to be rescued." He didn't argue, didn't shout. He just stood there. The fight drained out of him, the guilt too heavy to carry. When he finally turned to leave, he hesitated at the door. "I don't have anywhere to go." I nodded. "Then maybe now you'll learn what home means." He didn't look back. The The door closed softly behind him. No thunder, no storm, just silence again. I stood there for a long time, watching his shadow disappear down the street. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes quietly through the cracks of your front door when you finally stop letting the wrong people back in. A month after Michael's last visit, I walked into the county financial office with a folder under my arm. Neat, labeled, final. Inside it were documents that once tied me to chaos. Pension files, deed papers, insurance claims. Now they were mine again, signed properly, verified officially. My name, not forged, not borrowed, won but owned. The clerk smiled politely as she stamped each page. "Everything looks perfect, Mrs. Collins," she said. I nodded. "It finally does." Walking out of that building, I felt lighter. Not like someone who'd won a case, but like someone who'd survived a storm and found her footing again. Justice, I learned, isn't the loud victory you see in movies. It's paperwork that finally tells the truth. It's a woman signing her own name without shaking. I used the little money I'd recovered to renovate my house. Not fancy, just honest. New curtains, fresh paint, a garden bench in the front yard. I planted tulips where the weeds used to grow. Because when you've spent your life surrounded by thorns, color feels like rebellion. Neighbors started stopping by again. The same ones who had whispered during the scandal. They brought pies, casseroles, polite smiles, some out of guilt, some out of curiosity. But I welcomed them with grace, not for them, but for me. Because dignity doesn't shout. It simply refuses to disappear. A week later, my lawyer called. "Mrs. Collins," he said, "the restitution is almost complete. But there's more. The fraud division is opening a civil claim. You could be compensated further." I smiled faintly. "I don't need more money," I said. "Just make sure my name is cleared everywhere it was used." He paused. "You sure? It could be a large settlement." "Yes," I replied softly. "Let them keep their coins. I'll keep my peace." The following Sunday, I visited the small cemetery where my husband, Randall, was buried. The sky was bright, sharp blue with scattered clouds. I brought flowers, not white lilies, but red tulips, the same I'd planted at home. "Randall," I whispered, placing them down, "they tried to spend your memory, but it bought their own downfall instead." A breeze passed through the trees, gentle, approving. I smiled. He would have liked that line. When I returned home, there was a letter in my mailbox. It was from Tara, handwritten, no return address. I opened it slowly, expecting venom, but it wasn't that. It was confession. "Evelyn, you were right about everything. I thought I was helping Michael, but I was just feeding his pride. He blames you, but I blame myself. The money's gone. I'm gone. If you ever think of me, just remember, I finally see who you were trying to be. I hope you find peace. I don't deserve it." I folded the letter carefully, placed it in the drawer beside my husband's old watch. Some things didn't need to be forgiven, just archived. That night, I cooked dinner for myself. Roasted vegetables, tea, and a slice of apple pie. I sat by the window, lights low, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes past my gate. One of them waved. I waved back, and for a moment, I thought, maybe this is what justice feels like. Not a courtroom, not an apology, just an evening where nothing hurts anymore. Weeks later, the church committee invited me back to volunteer. I started teaching young women how to manage money, how to protect themselves, how to read contracts, how to say no when someone tries to guilt them into giving more than they have. They listened, really listened. One of them asked, "Miss Evelyn, did someone ever steal from you?" I smiled gently. "Yes," I said, "but I took something back they can't ever replace." "What's that?" she asked. "My self-respect." The room went quiet, but in that silence I heard something powerful, belief, that night. As I closed my ledger, the one where I tracked every penny since the scandal. I wrote a single line at the bottom, balance restored, in soul and in savings. Then I closed it for good. The next morning, I donated part of my restitution fund to a women's shelter downtown, anonymously, because revenge gives you one night of satisfaction, but rebuilding gives you a lifetime of quiet mornings. When the sun rose over Willow Creek, the light hit the tulips outside my window just right. Soft gold against red petals. I took my coffee, stepped outside, and breathed deeply. No bitterness. No fear. Just air that finally felt like mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was living. And as I looked down the empty road where Michael once walked away, I whispered, "You wanted freedom, son. Now you'll learn what it costs." Then I turned back inside, the door closing behind me, not with sadness, but with peace that didn't need an audience. Because sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about never being the same fool twice. It's been a year since everything came undone, and somehow everything came together. People say time heals, but I don't think it does. Time doesn't stitch you back. It just teaches you how to live with the scars until one day you stop tracing them. These days, my mornings are slower. I wake up to the sound of birds instead of my own thoughts running wild. The house smells like coffee again. Not fear, not anger, just home. I've rearranged the furniture, not because I needed change, but because I wanted to remind myself that I could. There's power in that, in knowing you can move things without breaking them. Sometimes I still see Michael around town. He walks differently now, shoulders bent, eyes lowered, always in a hurry to avoid me. He doesn't speak, and neither do I. There's nothing left to say that isn't already written in silence. Tara moved out of state. Someone told me she works at a diner. When I heard that, I didn't feel joy or pity, just balance. Life always collects its dues, one way or another. I didn't remarry, didn't move, didn't start over, because I didn't need to. I just continued, quietly, deliberately, and finally, freely. Every Saturday, I visit the church garden where I help plant flowers for the community. We grow marigolds and tulips, bright things that dare to bloom even in hard soil. Sometimes I think that's all any of us are really doing, trying to bloom where we were buried. A few months ago, the mayor invited me to speak at a local women's event. The topic was resilience and recovery. I remember standing on that stage, looking at the faces in front of me, young, hopeful, scared, curious. I took a breath and said, "I'm not here to tell you how to be strong. I'm here to remind you that you already are." They clapped. Some cried. And in that moment, I realized something. The story wasn't about revenge. It was about returning to myself. Because the hardest part of betrayal isn't what they take from you. It's how long it takes to stop apologizing for trusting the wrong people. That night, when I came home, the house felt lighter. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the moon rise over Willow Creek. The same moon that once witnessed my tears now watched my peace. I thought about Randall, his laugh, his kindness, the way he used to call me sunshine, even when the lights went out. And I smiled, whispering, "You'd be proud, old man. I didn't just survive them. I outlived their noise." Outside, the wind moved through the tulips. Each one bent gently, then straightened again. And I thought, that's life. Not unbroken, but unbowed. I finished my tea, turned off the lights, and before heading to bed, I glanced at the old family photo on the wall, the one with Michael's little boy smile. For a second, I let myself remember that version of him. Then I whispered, "I still love you, but I love myself more." And with that, I closed the door on yesterday, softly, without regret, because peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision to stop giving your pain a seat at the table. 5 years have passed. It feels strange saying that out loud, as if peace can be measured in years. The house feels lighter now. The walls no longer echo with shame or anger. Just the sound of my own footsteps, calm and certain. The tulips outside bloom earlier every spring, and even the air seems softer when it moves through the open window. Maybe healing isn't about forgetting what happened. Maybe it's about finally standing in the same place, without hurting anymore. I turned 67 last week. The women from church surprised me with a small lunch, laughter, hymns, and too much chocolate cake. They call me Miss Evelyn now, and sometimes when I catch the way they look at me, I realize something. People don't admire you for surviving. They admire you for surviving quietly. Michael didn't come to the lunch. He sends polite cards every few months. He's married again, has a son. I see them sometimes at the market. He walks slower now, more careful, as if he finally understands what it means to lose peace. That's how life works. It never forgets the lesson. It just waits for you to understand it. Tara moved away years ago. Someone told me she works with a charity now. I don't know if it's true, but I hope it is, because sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who wake up last. But at least they wake up. As for me, I spend my mornings at the community center, teaching young women how to manage money, how to sign their own checks, how to say no without guilt. I tell them, you don't have to be rich to be respected. Just stop financing your own disrespect. That line always makes them laugh, but later I see them thinking about it, and that's enough. Every evening I sit on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun settle behind the trees. It's the same porch where I once stood, humiliated, groceries in hand, wondering if kindness had any place left in this world. Now the same air that once carried laughter at my expense carries peace instead. Last week, I found one of Randall's old letters, hidden inside a cookbook I hadn't opened in years. It said, "If life ever gets too loud, remember, silence is where your strength sleeps." And I finally understood what he meant. Silence isn't emptiness, it's control. It's the sound of no one else deciding who you are. I don't carry bitterness anymore, only boundaries, and I've learned that's enough. So when people ask me how I found peace after everything, I tell them. I stopped waiting for apologies that were never coming. I stopped feeding mouths that only learned to bite. And I started feeding my soul instead. They once laughed when I brought groceries to their house. Now I feed people wisdom, not meals they'll mock later. And that's the difference between giving and giving away. If you've ever been made to feel small for your kindness, hold on. Because one day, that same kindness will be your crown. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these truths that too many women live quietly. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? I love knowing how far these stories travel.